welcome to this talk today with Doug Aitken. It's planned to happen like 45 minutes talk between Doug Aitken and me. If there is any questions, please don't ask. That's new. And after their 45 minutes talk, Doug will sign books here on the left side. If you want, it's also about 50 minutes to 20 minutes. We have to keep very fast because Doug has also another job tonight. He will go to film the exhibition by his own. Yeah. So let's start, and please welcome Doug Aitken.
Hello.
Hi, Doug.
We meet again.
How are you doing?
Great.
There is really a lot of work that you made this summer. You also made new pieces for a show at in the gallery. You made incredible work here at the Schirn Kunsthalle. So maybe you can tell a little bit about the working processes that are behind that people don't know how you work.
Okay. Anyways, it's great to be here, and thank you for spending your Saturday with us. Matthias has been we've been through an amazing couple weeks putting together the exhibition here, and it's been, it's been very, very fascinating, very intense, kind of putting together so many different works from different mediums. And, just to maybe talk about it for a moment, one of the strange sensations I had when I was coming back here today was I recognized that really the exhibition here is something which doesn't, for me, I could have never made it in a year or two or three. It's really, when I walk through the exhibition, you see different passages of time, different processes that you've had, different kind of experiences that artworks have created for you. And the earliest work here is Diamond Sea, which is, I think, 1996, and the most recent is right now outside. So it's very strange kind of seeing this spectrum of time and then seeing these kind of islands of different concepts. I see, in a lot of ways, each artwork is almost like a limb in a tree. And I think first you have a question, first you have a concept, and you start to develop that, and you push it into a language. And the language isn't always clear at first, but eventually, I think when you're making an artwork, you just have to really challenge the concept to a point where it starts taking on a life of its own. And the exhibition here was very interesting to work on with Matthias because at first I was very reluctant, very resistant to create something which had a number of works that had already been made. And then I started to realize that you could actually kind of choreograph these works that existed almost like musical notes, and you could try to find a way to make an exhibition where these ideas would interlink and they kind of cross-pollinate. So I pass it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, what is obvious is that there are some elements that kind of migrate from one work to the other, that interconnect with each other. If there are quotes, for instance, with works like Diamond Sea that comes back in Migration Empire or others, that seems that the production is also based not on linearity, but there is some elements that you kind of push further. You mentioned to me that when you remember the short scene in Black Mirror where these two guys staying outside the hotel and singing song 1, or singing this song that migrated to song 1, that was an initial kind of idea that created the next work. So is this a very typical moment that you work on already made stuff that is kind of going further?
Well, it's interesting because I've never seen the creative act as being a really linear process. I've never seen the idea that you make an artwork, you finish that artwork, you make another one, you finish that and make another one. I've always, to me, it's like life. Life is, you know, you have different conversations and different things stimulate you, and you might want to kind of, you know, move in one direction and really explore this idea, but at the same time, there's always a multiplicity of things, and I think art is very much like life in that way. It's very kaleidoscopic.
People can feel a little bit lost, not in your work, but in our life. Like there is so many things, so complex realities that it's also a sign of our times that there are so many people that cannot deal with all these many options to communicate all the time. And in a sense, like Black Mirror is a work that points out this very situation of a person that is always on the move, never stagnate, never stop. These are terms that she uses to kind of describe her, not her, but our idea of permanently moving, not stop, not. Do you think this is something which is very contemporary, which is a very strong, like the shadow of technological progress?
Well, I think with a lot of the works here, I was interested in making works that, to me, they felt like they were exploring the modern landscape, the landscape that we living people are occupying, that we're questioning, that we're trying to come to terms with. And, you know, I think in some ways, the act of making an artwork is kind of creating a series of questions and looking to, you know, go deeper into these questions. You know, so I think in many ways, I didn't see these works in this exhibition as being having huge references to history in a lot of ways. I see them as being much more right now, kind of in the present. And that also, just one other thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of what do you want from an artwork? Forget about this show and the work that I have here, but when you ask yourselves that and you really say, what do you want that encounter to be when you go to a museum or a gallery or you see an incredible performance or something? You know, what is the experience that you want to take away from that? And to me, I've always been fascinated by the idea of something that is in the present, to be engaged in something that kind of strips away ideas of the future and strips away the past, and I'm kind of in that moment. And so I think in a lot of ways, you know, with going back to the exhibition, I saw this as a chance to try to make an exhibition that didn't really have a sense of time. You know, you're not really in Frankfurt. You're not really, you know, wondering is it 6:30 or 6:45. You can kind of, you know, have this place to fall into these pieces and, you know, hopefully come out with an experience that's distinctly your own.
If we look back into your work from 2007 to today, one has the feeling that you are like challenging yourself to crossing borders all the time, to leave the traditional spaces. We will maybe later talk about liquid architecture, which is a kind of term that you often use. Do you think it's needed to cross that border and to open where art happens traditionally to other spaces? Like he made at the MoMA, he made an installation, a video installation on the facade of the building, or the same, which is Song 1 here, he made for the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. And finally, the station-to-station train that travels from New York to San Francisco, exactly kind of a radical step into something that is not comparable to what traditional museums and art spaces do. Do you think this is for you, it's an important step. Do you think it's needed for the art world as such to open this door?
Well, I think it's, in a lot of ways, art and culture, it's a space we have in society which is less tethered to capitalism and kind of the weight of day-to-day encounters. And it's also the space that we have to try to innovate and fail at times, but to innovate new languages. And I think the value of culture to us as a society is, it's the space, it's the frontier where experimentation can happen. It's the place where something that is new can be developed. And it's a space where really, languages can be born. And so I think in a lot of ways, I don't really, the works you talked about, like Sleepwalkers at MoMA, this was this is a really strange project. It was the Museum MoMA in New York, and I was having a conversation with the director there, and he said, come down, the museum was under construction, he said, come down and look at the space. It's a construction site, it will be the Museum of Modern Art in a few years. And what could you do in one of the galleries here? And I kind of looked at the space, but the space was, it was like this incredible construction site, these giant walls that are like wrapping around Manhattan. And I thought, well, what if the surface of the building just becomes the artwork? What if you just take people in the city and you bring them into a story, a narrative, and that just becomes the architecture? So I think a lot of times, concepts come first, the idea comes first, and then, it develops a form, in a sense. Song 1, the piece which is upstairs, a kind of cylindrical screen, that work was originally a circular building in Washington, D.C. It was this, I'm so addicted to talking with my hands, I've got to get rid of this thing. I want to just wave right now. But it was originally this circular 360-degree film work, and after we made that, it lived at nighttime for 3 or 4 months in Washington, and then the work kind of disappeared, and I couldn't really figure out how to allow that work to continue to live. And we were working on the show, and I was really struggling with that. And then finally I thought, this solution is so simple. You just take this circular piece off a circular building, and you just pull it off, and then it's like a sculpture. It just becomes a holographic sculpture. So things like that here in Frankfurt have been incredibly meaningful to me, like a series of kind of, obstacles and problems, and trying to find ways to create solutions where the works can communicate in new ways.
But this is a good example when you transformed this cylindrical building into what is now here inside the space. One has the feeling that while the facade is opening the space, and you can see it from very abroad and kind of liberates you from your point of view, here inside you feel like not prisoned, but somehow very strongly framed by this work. Is this maybe the problem of the space, that you cannot disappear, that you cannot move beyond the building? I mean, when you stay outside, it's totally different from your situation to the work than if you are inside the work. Mm-hmm. And this is what you came about in the very beginning when we thought about how to make this show, that you wanted to disappear the building, that you want to make it liquid, that everything is kind of interconnected.
Well, I think one of the early ideas that we had when we were talking about the exhibition was to kind of create something that sort of erased the architecture. So you kind of walk inside these rooms and corridors, and you're really kind of walking through a sequence of encounters as opposed to works which are more formally displayed, like a series of rooms that are brightly lit, one piece after another. And to me, I found that very interesting because it seemed like there was a possibility to create a different kind of relationship with an artwork and the viewer. And to talk about that for a minute, the idea that the viewer has less space between object and self, and that the viewer can become one with or inside a concept. And in the process, is it possible for the viewer to become more empowered, where the viewer is really claiming that experience and encounter as their own? And this is just something I'm very interested in.
Yeah. But again, space or landscape is a very, very crucial element in your work that one can see from Diamond Sea, for instance, where you have this big landscape of the Namib Desert, and then you have some other landscapes like the urban landscape, the big city, the city where Song 1, for instance, happens. Would you give a kind of idea how you understand landscape in this broad sense? If there is the landscape as we know it, and then there is the landscape that is more a kind of industrial or civilized space?
Well, I think the use of landscape in a lot of these works is more psychological. I'm interested in something which is less documentary, it's less rigid. Diamond Sea, which was shot in the Namib Desert in a diamond area which was used for mining and closed since 1908. This region, I saw conceptually that the fences that surround it, the perimeter of the location, creates the narrative. And we would go there, and what we would find inside would essentially create the work. That would author the work. So, that's one approach to landscape, where you have, this very kind of conceptual framework, but then inside it becomes very interpretive, almost fictional. Something else like Song 1 is really using the idea of one simple pop song, like a 3.5-minute pop song that kind of everybody's heard, to become this connecting tissue that just moves from person to person and scene to scene, and it becomes almost a mapping device, a way to kind of map a modern nocturnal city through the complete range of diversity from person to person.
Mm. And also the landscape, it's kind of...
What's up here? Oh.
Is there some images? Or?
I want to watch.
Oh, yeah.
This was my house. And then we
oh yeah, here.
Destroyed it. And this is the, wow, it's going very fast. This is a very fast slideshow.
Before you mentioned you can do it very quickly, that kind of show.
It's too hot.
Too hot. But we just saw this building, which is Doug's house, and his private house in Venice Beach, and on the first hand, there are some elements inside that house which are very funny and very crazy, in a sense that the building as such is an instrument, is a music instrument. You step on the stairs, and there are some microphones embedded in the concrete, and there is a record, a player somewhere, a receiver that. Can you how would you let's speak about sound, because here Sonic Fountain, it kind of reminds me on that work, on your idea of sound and how it triggers different emotions or different pictures.
Well, I think Matthias was reflecting on both the Sonic Fountain outside and the house, the location I live in. I lived in a house for a long time, about 12 or 13 years, and eventually I created work that involved destroying my house, and I placed my mother and father inside it, and over 7 days we choreographed the destruction of the house around them. So it was really, it was from the glass windows shattering to the fireplace collapsing to the trees falling outside, and that basically became a film. And then that was my house, and there was no more house. So then, when I rebuilt a space that I live in now, a lot of the ideas that I find myself working with in my artwork kind of leaked into the house and the architecture itself. So the concrete foundation of the house has geological microphones. So you can go to a mixing board and you can turn on the house and you can hear the geological plates. You can hear the earth moving underneath it through the speakers in the wall. Or you can walk up the stairs and you can turn the stairs on, and there's a microphone inside the wood of each step, so you can play them at different notes. the furniture, the tables are 80 slices of marble, so you can play them like a kind of stone xylophone or another chambered wood one. This is a different house. That's not mine. I wish that was mine. That was a house we made disappear. But anyway, so I think to come back and not kind of run through lists of things, a lot of this comes back to the idea that there's possibility to explore ideas everywhere around us all the time, and I think that sometimes you find the most banal and ordinary things can become transformative to you. The sonic fountain outside, which is basically sequences of dripping water in an excavated pit with underwater microphones. This was a piece where I was interested in this idea of kind of creating this soundscape, this landscape through sound. These patterns and rhythms kind of move between order and music and randomness and chaos. And in a lot of ways, to me, I'm very interested in that. I'm interested in that tension between abstraction and representation, between fragmentation and narrative. And I see these as really looking towards, like, what is our language? What is our language now as we're living in this kind of accelerated world and we're moving into the future? And how can the art that you make help you explore that and share these questions?
We already spoke about, or I did it, that there are some elements that migrate from one work to another, like some things that produce the next work. One could also say there is chance that produces the next work. And if we speak about Sonic Fountain, there is also this idea of John Cage's, not only his aleatoric thing, but also his most famous work, like 4 minutes 33 seconds, which is a piece that kind of brings the environment into the scene. So it's not the piano that is not played for 4 minutes 33 seconds, but it's the environment that produces the music. So would you say this is similar to that idea, that there is some environment around that creates the music? I mean, it's a site-specific work in a sense.
Right. I mean, it was actually very interesting when I walked in a few hours ago, because it was right on the hour that the bells were chiming at the church. And I could kind of hear this incredible crossover between the patterns of the fountain and the patterns of the bells, which goes back to a very Cagean idea that, everything has this possibility to become, a language, or to be seen as art in a way, whether it's the absence of something or the presence of something.
Yeah.
And I think that idea also, that happens very much in terms of the filmic works in the exhibition. When you walk into something like a piece like Black Mirror, which is 5 stages in this woman's life who's kind of accelerating and becoming nomadic, or you walk into the stillness of Diamond Sea, what you basically have, if you strip away the image and there's no film there, is you have editing. You have a tempo of flashing light and sound. And if you reduce cinema to its rawest element, sound and light, you have this very interesting thing. You have a kind of rhythm, almost a subconscious rhythm that can be created. And I think that's going back to the exhibition. That's something I was very interested in, is could you have these different patterns in different parts of the architecture? Could you kind of walk over here and find like a very quiet encounter, and in another room like Black Mirror, there's something that's almost violent. It's kind of flashing and cutting, and the sounds are harsh and brutal. And in some ways, there was a lot of works which are not in this exhibition, and when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about how to try to create a landscape that was specific for Schirn Kunsthalle in Frankfurt, and to have a balance of works which have nothing except for landscape, for example, like Diamond Sea, or are crowded with society like Song 1, or maybe one individual like Black Mirror. To try to have this kind of range and diversity so that you could kind of fall into it and make this experience something that's very personal. It's not so mediated.
Yeah. I mean, we already spoke about the term, or this idea of the landscape. And one has the idea that there is a conflict or a dialectic between the nature and technology. Like in the beginning with Diamond Sea, which was your first video installation. Also before, I mean, you have been very much focused on speed and machines, things like that, rockets.
Sounds kind of weird.
Yeah. So what? I lost my point. No, in Diamond Sea, for instance, you see this this untouched nature, this desert space at the same, or not far away, in the same area. You see this technological, high-tech thing that works.
Yeah, I think that juxtaposition that you're talking about, I mean, you know, which exists in Diamond Sea, where you see this. You know, the Namib Desert, this incredibly ancient desert, you know, kind of cohabiting, you know, with this extremely modern technology, this man-made technology, which is using, you know, computer-automated systems to pull diamonds from the surface of this desert. You know, that juxtaposition is something I am very fascinated by, and it's not the technology I'm fascinated by. It's how we are trying to navigate balancing life in a landscape which is, you know, less organic and is rapidly changing. And I think it kind of brings us all into a number of questions, which I'm sure we all share, in terms of, you know, what does it mean to be an individual now? And where are we going? And I think I'm very interested in those kind of core issues at the bottom of many of these works.
But there is, I mean, I will not insist, but if we are in a migration empire, we see these buildings, these motel rooms or hotel rooms that are on the far outside the city, where people go in and only stay there for one night, mostly, and then move on. And what happens is that there are animals that occupy these spaces. So, of course, it's a conflict, or there is a juxtaposition between these, the nature that is represented by animals and the culture that is represented by these motels. My first idea was there is a kind of Ark Noir idea behind, as well as later in Black Mirror, where you see this fantastic, beautiful landscape, and then there are these parabole anthems in the middle of this country and kind of destroying, or not destroying, but it's part of the landscape, part of the nature. So you think it's you play with this breaks or these interruptions or this ideas of bringing different things together, like a surreal part.
Well, I do. I gravitate towards friction and tension in my work. And, you know, to talk about the work Migration, you know, this is the work which you find, you know, a sequence of animals in hotel rooms. And, you know, but it's also a work which we filmed over 3,000 miles. And every single room is a completely different city and place. And these rooms are, you know, these very just cheap, generic hotels, Days Inn, Best Western, something like that. And I was interested in this idea that we've created this landscape of incredible sameness, where one could fall asleep and wake up and almost be disoriented as to where you are. You know, the plastic cups on the counter, the telephones next to it with the red flashing light, the shower curtains awaiting your shower at 8:30 in the morning. You know, and I was interested in that idea that we've, you know, almost consciously and subconsciously created a landscape which is so repetitious. So with that work, I wanted to see these two different lines. One line is now, the present, what we just discussed, and the other is a sense of deep ecology or deep nature, and what the patterns that were always there, the migratory patterns, you know, in many cases of many of these animals, where we tried to reintroduce them in the same exact areas where we found the hotels. And, you know, with a work like that, you know, there's a concept and there's a structure to it, but there's also this randomness, because you really don't know exactly what's going to happen when a bird of prey is, you know, on a king-size bed, or a western mountain lion, you know, comes in and starts sniffing and scanning a room and, you know, equates that it should be destroyed. But those kinds of situations I'm very attracted to. In Diamond Sea, you have the tension between this ancient landscape and this modern technology. In Migration, you have that same kind of tension between modern architecture and urban planning and a kind of condition which is very different than that.
Let's talk about perception.
That's a big one.
It's a big one. But we are now with Migration Empire, and one can see a lot of animals that watching us while we watching them. And it's like a metaphor for how we see, or how these animals see through us. So it's the first time for all of these animals that they enter a space like that, and how they behave themselves in these rooms. And it's much more about how they perceive, and how we totally forgot how we can perceive things that are so common.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that idea in the work, which really surprised me, was, kind of going into it, we didn't really know exactly what was going to happen in any of these scenes. And, I found within myself a kind of sense of awakening, when I would see, a certain encounter, a certain animal come in and read something, like you said, which seems to us as so mundane, so ordinary, so average, but it's a kind of moment of survival. You're reading, the perception of reading these rooms is basically the difference between a predator and prey.
And I think perception goes further. Perception is also, in your work, something that, there are some elements that kind of feel like like an explosion of images, when things become like a kaleidoscopic landscape, when things disappear like in millions. It has to do with there is some element that destroys our ordinary way to perceive and see differently, or perceive things in another way.
Well, I think a little while ago we were talking about the idea of language, and when I say the word language, I don't mean necessarily spoken language. I mean the language that we see, how we see things, and I think that in a lot of these projects, I'm fascinated by trying to find alternate or other ways to perceive, ways to explore perception, and I think in a lot of ways, as a culture, the history of our culture is storytelling, and stories always have a beginning and an end. A novel, an opera, a theater piece, a film ends when the film is over. And I think a lot of these works are looking at the idea that maybe the way we perceive is actually more fragmented, it's more open. It's hundreds of pieces of information instead of all those pieces put into one convenient story. So I like the idea that you can walk into a piece, any of these pieces, and there's not really a beginning or an end to it. I like the idea that you can kind of go in and sit on one scene or one sequence and kind of think about it and weld it together with something else. And to me, that's my hope, is that anyone that's here today could kind of take this exhibition and take these fragments and kind of make it your own and bring it into your own language and see it in a way which is not so detached and removed, and see it as something else that can stimulate and create an experience that's unique to every different person. Yeah, I think that's
I thank you very much for being here.
No, and it's been such a pleasure being in Frankfurt, and old and new friends, and just to host this work, and also to allow me to give these works away to you. I'm eternally grateful. Thank you.
Thanks.